you want to feel better, practice once a week. Come to class once a week. If you want to make some significant change, practice 3 times a week. If you want to transform your entire life, be here 6 days a week.
You have a book that we've had in the gifting suite for everyone, Perfectly Imperfect, The Art and Soul of Yoga Practice.
Reed Tracy published that.
Yeah, Hay House, which is great.
Yeah.
And you tell the story in here about walking with Louise Hay, and she told you about self-talk. Could you maybe speak to that story?
Yeah, I'm going to paraphrase. I don't remember exactly how I wrote it in the book, but there's a cleansing place in outside of Palm Springs. You'd know it if I said it. But you go and you fast. You drink a little green juice, bunch of pills, herbal pills. You fast. You get colonics twice a day. You get, the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And I just showed up to do a 5 or 7 day fast. And then there's this woman radiating over, sitting over on the couch, this kind of lounge areas, and she was just glowing. This woman was just radiating. And so I noticed her, and then I was out. You kind of take these little walks around on the garden paths, and I was walking, and I saw her walking, and I looked up, and there she was again, and she waved me over. And so we just started walking. She's like, so, yeah, what's your name? And just, just small chat like that. And then she was talking about how her whole commitment in life was to be a contribution to people, and that it started with her personal growth and spiritual development, and that she wanted to create a business around that. And then I said, wait, what's your name? And she's like, I'm Louise Hay. And I go, I know you.
How crazy.
Yeah. And then I told her more about myself, and we started talking, and she started, she just made an offer to me to get in touch with her. Yeah. And her work. I think maybe she even gave me Reed's, contact or something out of that. And then I said, well, I already I'm under contract with Simon & Schuster, and I have a 2-book deal with them. And they paid me a $2.2 million advance. You think you could meet that? And I said, but I'm totally open. And I said, look, I'm always open to killing 2 birds with 1 stone. And she's like, no. She goes, you don't want to kill any birds. She goes, let's not kill birds. And she said, I forget what she had an alternative to that. It's like, lesson learned.
Yeah, it's something like that. Yeah, it's in the. I wish
it's in there, right? Yeah.
But yeah, make birds fly without stones.
And then fast forward, probably 4 years, maybe 3 years later, I published a children's book with not Penguin, but Harper Row in London, in Europe. And so I was on tour in Europe for my kids' book. And there was a book convention, the annual book convention, European Book Convention, and I'm just walking around. I was giving a talk, for my book release there, and but I was walking booth to booth, and I saw Hay House Europe.
Right.
And so I walk in, and I'm just chatting, and then this guy in there, kind of tall, skinny, reddish hair guy maybe. Yeah. he starts chatting, and then he goes, "Oh, you're Baron Baptiste," and he said, "I would love to do a book with you." And he said, I've been following your work. And he goes, but what I want to do with you is the next version of you. Like, you've done yoga, and yoga's done. Like that, the market's saturated, but I want to do something. I want to do the next iteration of you, the grown-up version of Baron. Yeah. And so we did. I ended up doing 2 books with them. And Being a Power was the first one, and Perfectly Imperfect, which hit New York Times bestseller, top 10 in all domains, and then Wall Street Journal, top 10, USA Today, like all those lists. It did pretty good. Yeah. It's in 22 languages.
Has anyone read it yet? I know some of you just got it for the first time. Yeah, it's great. How many of you, show of hands so Baron could see, do yoga? Okay. How many of you do it at least once a week? More than once a week? 5 times a week? Anyone? Okay, we got 1, 2. You do yoga how often, Neil? Every day. Every day. Awesome. And how often do you do it, Jamie?
Good for you.
Every day. Sorry, what did you say?
I said for the last 1,605 days.
for the last 1,605
You're feeling pretty
days.
good, right? Yeah. You changed your life like that. Yeah.
Go
very
up to
good.
the mic for a minute real quick. What caused you to do this, and what has it done for you?
My wife's been athletic her life, and I've just watched her be incredible. And I've practiced self-neglect. I'm really good at it. I don't like exercise. It registers in my brain as a death threat. But I was at one of Joe's events on early September 2017, and one of the members of the group said he'd been working out every day. And I got back from the event, and I just felt my wife had started yoga. And I'd actually noticed her whole physique change, just her musculature, her body changed. And I just felt like a calling, and I thought, I'm going to do yoga every day for the rest of my life. So I started working with Michael Anderson, Jessica Micheletti, and Anne-Marie Kramer, all of whom are trained by you.
Yeah.
And
Where are you?
In Sacramento.
Oh, yeah, nice, yeah.
Yeah, and I did 100 classes in 90 days. And some private coaching, and I developed a practice.
Wait, you did 100 classes in 90 days?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I wanted to
you're
develop
legit. Yeah, you're
a
for real.
practice that I could actually take with me wherever I went. I travel a lot, and it's like I only need the space of the size of a bath towel to be able to do yoga. And I also took it on to look at it metaphorically, both from the point of view of the physical benefit, but I started to look at where in my life would I benefit from being more flexible? And where in my life, in my poses, where in my life could I find more balance?
Yeah, very good.
And my relationship with breath has been the biggest thing. I find that I breathe my way through life differently.
Oh, you're speaking, my music. You're singing my song. Yeah, I
So,
get it.
thank you.
It's. I'll just say this. Something you're speaking to that I'm hearing, just to bring everybody into it, is we use the body. Well, in my approach to yoga practice, what I call Baptiste yoga, we use the body as an access, not necessarily as an end game. Of course, to keep the body healthy and, like you say, flexible and functional, strength and mobility, and that serves you in any area, whatever you're up to in your life.
Yeah.
Picking up your kids, your groceries, your car keys. If you fall down when you're 80 years old, you'll be able to stand, get yourself back up, right?
Yeah.
Like that. So, but we use the body as an access beyond that into principles. Like principle is like a living principle in life and living, and then you bring it out everywhere as you're doing.
Yes.
I love it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome.
Really good work.
That-
In my studios, we have many of the studios have a flyer that says if you want to feel better, practice once a week. Come to class once a week. If you want to make some significant change, practice 3 times a week. If you want to transform your entire life, be here 6 days a week. And you've done that. Good work.
You're one of the most well-known yoga teachers, instructors, mentors in the world. For people that don't know who you are, how many of you until just now had no idea who Baron Baptiste is, right? Could you give them some background on who you are, how many people you've reached, what you do, that sort of thing? And then I want to, my goal for today is to leave everyone here with a inspiration to go take on a practice that absolutely can enhance and transform your life in ways you can't even imagine. And I think you're the best person that could possibly direct them in that area.
Yeah. Well, in a nutshell, I was born into a family of yoga teachers. My parents opened the first yoga center in San Francisco in like 1952, long before I was born. And but my parents were real like seekers, and they were like they would travel the world. You know, I would go to Asia. They'd take me along, my sisters and I along with them. We'd go to India and all over Asia and study with different, in holistic institutes and ashrams with different gurus. And that was, probably my greatest education. And to a great degree, when you're a kid, we started going when I was probably like 9 or 10 years old. And I was rolling my eyes most of the time. I wanted to be back home playing with my friends. I didn't want to, so we're going to this, okay, here's some dude in an orange robe up there talking, we're meditating. I'm like, oh, Mom, can I go back to the room and play a game? And, but, in hindsight, just moving forward in my life, when I got into my early 20s, I was on my own. I moved to Los Angeles, and I was like, and I was grappling with my own. I was lost, confused. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I had no purpose. I really was a pretty lost young guy without going into my teenage years, hugely rebellious, hugely destructive. I mean, almost everything you spoke to yesterday, I was like, okay, did that. There were certain lines I wouldn't cross, but I was pretty self-abusive.
Yeah.
And just ran the streets. And all that. So I was all out, coming out of all that, I wanted to find myself. So I left San Francisco, where I grew up, moved to LA I knew I wanted to clean my life up and find a bigger purpose. I felt something was calling me. So I started recognizing, like, wait, I have some practices, things that were real gifts that my parents introduced me to and gave me and that I was around. And I was like, I started putting those into practice. But I remember my dad would talk to me in my teenage years saying, well, don't go to college. You're going to become a yoga teacher. And I'd always say, Dad, I'm like, the last thing I'm going to do on God's green earth is ever, mark my word, ever become a yoga teacher, right? Like, I'm not going to be like you all. You all are kind of weird, and I am going to be normal, as Dave Sullivan would say, yeah. And so, long story short, I worked in a lot of different industries. I worked in radio, I was in acting, I was, got into fitness, I was doing private training, and then something started happening that I do these training sessions, and I was right in Beverly Hills, so I started, getting these, like, celebrities, like, big name A-listers, and that world's small there. When you're good at something,
yeah.
The word passes around. And I was studying yoga, I was practicing yoga diligently, but I wouldn't teach it. So I would go with people and train them in more, classical, traditional fitness. And then at the end, I would do about 10 minutes of stretching, but it was really yoga practice. And then I'd put them talk them through a visualization and a meditation. And then what started happening is well, wait, could we do? I'd show up at their home to train them, and could we do more of the last 10 minutes? And then it just grew it just kept calling me in a lot of different ways. I went and interviewed to be a trainer in aerobic, a cross-training group fitness teacher, and it was called Voight Fitness and Dance in Hollywood, and it was the mecca of fitness on the planet. People would come from all over the world. It was where trends in fitness used to start back in the 90s, and yeah. It was a dream. That was top of the line, to be on staff, be a trainer at Voight was. So I went in to not do yoga, but to do that. And I auditioned. It was a group audition, people going up. And I auditioned, and they pulled me, the owners, Karen and Hank, Voight, pulled me aside after and said, we're not going to hire you as a fitness trainer, but someone here knows your background. Your dad was a Mr. America, but he used yoga. You have a whole yoga background. And they're we haven't been able to make yoga work here in this, fitness people don't, we've tried a lot of different teachers, and it just hasn't worked here. We want to try you out if you'll come and teach yoga. And I'm oh man, are you kidding me? And so I said, okay. So they said, make up a flyer. Here, you're going to teach, I forget, Mondays and Saturday mornings, something like that. I made up a flyer, and I just coined this term. What do I call it for fitness? But I go, power yoga. And then I put up this flyer, and it was a Saturday morning, and I was those classes at fitness, they had 9 or 10 different classrooms, dance studio kind of. And my room was up, you have to walk 3 stories up, and it was on this top room. And I remember walking up this long line, and I knew there were 2 rooms up there, and I was walking, I go, oh man, I wonder what class all these people are waiting in line for. And so I get to the top, I'm holy shit, this is my class. There's 75 people there. And I just put in the flyer celebrity trainer to yada. I listed a whole bunch of cool names, and then
you knew how to market to Americans.
Barely, yeah, barely. But I was this is about fitness. It's about mind-body fitness. Strengthen your mental musculature along with your all that. And then I led the class, and I thought I sucked. And I was literally stood by the door when people are leaving, almost like, sorry. I felt like apologetic.
Yeah.
And people are like lit up. And then Hank was there, the owner, he goes, man, people loved that. And so that launched something right there. It was just, the energy of was just there for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So just that moment of validation where you knew you were onto something.
Yeah,
Huh.
yeah.
You know-
And then that went, and I literally had, well, I got stuck at a certain point. I'll stop talking in a second.
No,
I'll
no,
just say
okay.
this part.
That's great.
It got to a point where almost about 3,000 people were coming through my classes every week.
Wow.
And I ended up in the largest room there, and it was, sold out bases, whether I taught at 2 in the afternoon or whenever, and there was nothing like that in LA. It was like this, it was flow, it was heat, it was, freeing and for people, and people walked out feeling better than they walked in, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember, but we started talking, like, well, what do you do? And you started telling me in marketing, and I'm like, do you know Jay Abraham?
Yes.
Yeah. And I just was on the phone with Jay the day before I came here. He says hello.
Thank you. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think his daughter's watching the live stream right now, Michelle.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. And but my story where I was in LA, that was like in the early 90s teaching. I was stuck at a certain point. I didn't know how to get out of that, just teaching classes. And I sensed there was something bigger. And I knew Tony Robbins somehow. I don't remember. I had some connection there. So I was on his list. And I was at home. And so my wife at the time, we had just had a new baby. It was probably a year old. We're living in an apartment in Bel Air. And I was barely making ends meet. I mean, now looking back, I made those Voight people rich.
Yeah.
But they were paying me 25 cents a person.
Wow.
25 cents a head. Yeah, and you're talking a lot of people, and they were charging, I think, $12 a class or something, and they'd give me a raise, everyone, anyhow, that's another story. So, yeah, and I'm grateful for the opportunity. It gave me my start. But this is what I'll say. I was at home one day, I got a cold call, and it was this guy trying to sell me a $5,000 weekend. And it was someone from Jay Abraham, a sales person from Jay Abraham's office. I'm like, I don't have $5,000. I'm a yoga teacher. I've got a wife, baby. I could barely pay rent. He's like, no, we'll guarantee, you'll get your money back. And if you don't, you won't pay, something like that. And so he signed me up for $5,000, $500 a month, anyhow, for 10 months. And my wife wouldn't talk to me. She was so furious, right? She's like, are you freaking nuts? Like, we can't even pay rent. Like, we can't even, I go, look, the guy guaranteed. So anyhow, I go to the Jay Abraham thing.
It's the same conversation most people have with their spouses coming in.
I put it out, It's like when I hear the 100,000 membership, I'm like, there's something about you put it out, you're playing a bigger game. It's a bigger force field, yeah?
Absolutely.
You're in. So I was like, no, I'm putting myself out. And my wife didn't understand the talk at the time. She was like, no, I've got a baby. I've got we need food.
Right.
So I understood it, but I was like, no, I need to do this, and I'll figure it out. Just trust me. So I did the whole thing with Jay the weekend, and I got one thing. It was like, write a letter. Just write a letter. I got something to get off my chest. Write it to my community, right? So I was like, okay, and do a workshop. I had never done a workshop. I was just doing classes or retreats. So I found a facility in Ojai, which is about an hour and a half outside of LA. And I wrote this whole letter, telling people this retreat is going to change your life. We're going to do yoga, meditation, personal growth, and it's going to change everything for you. It's going to be a transformation. And in those days, it wasn't online. You couldn't register online.
Right.
So I had the flyer, and then it was perforated, and then you send in a check, or you could write your credit card on the paper and you had to mail it to my house, right? So, I was like, okay, my wife's like, hey, I have to put money up now to hold the retreat center. I didn't even have money to make copies at Kinko's of the flyer,
Right.
hardly. And so it was, anyhow, I sent the letter out, and I'm like, look, we're going to charge $250 to come to the retreat. All I need is 10 people to pay for the Abraham seminar.
Right.
And then so I did the math. I sent the letter out, and then mail started pouring in, especially as the retreat was getting closer. The retreat facility only fit 40 people, like 39 people, and 250 people registered.
Oh, wow.
And we received all this money, and the room, literally the yoga room there, only fit like 40 people. And I had 50 people coming. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is a problem. This is a problem. And I'm like, I looked at my wife, I go, we have to send the money back. She goes, we're not sending the money back. Because this is going to pay off my college debt, So anyhow, that got me started into doing retreats.
Did they all show up,
workshops.
and what did you do? Yeah.
I got so creative. I created a schedule we found housing outside that property, and then I worked my butt off. I taught 12, 15 hours, morning, got everybody out hiking, in a morning hike. That's easy. Get everybody out, at 6, 7 a.m., do a long walk, and then the classes I put in rotation. So there was like a 8 a.m. class, 9:30 class. I built in 15-minute windows for myself to, take a piss, get some water, drink a smoothie. And I rotated people through and
That's really
made
good.
it work. Yeah.
And
that opened up a whole world for me. And the other thing is, I've never taught any personal development. I knew how to teach yoga, and I could lead meditation. So I'm like, oh, wait, I way over-promised. I don't know how to deliver on this promise. It's going to change your life. So...
Anyone ever done that before?
I'm like, shit, now what?
Hey, I hope you're enjoying this video, and I want to let you know that I have a new book that's come out, and if you'd like to get it absolutely free, there's a link below in the description, or you can wait till the end of this video, or you can simply go to joesfreebook.com and you can get a copy there.
I just looked, I had a recent really life-altering thing that I forgave my father and my mom. But really, it was with my father. I had discovered just a year before so much resentment that I had, and judgment I had toward my parents, toward my dad, and I went and forgave my father and asked for his forgiveness for judging him, for being a jerk of a son, and yada, yada. And that changed everything for me. It literally transformed my whole life, that one act. So at the program, I just created forgiveness workshops because it was the one thing I knew how to do.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I'll just share this one outcome because it stuck with me. It confirmed that I was on the right path. I had tapped into my calling, so that retreat happened. And by the way, there were a lot of, this is a side note, and I don't want to sound like I'm bragging, but a lot of the registrations that came in were just by names I didn't really recognize or anything like that. And then what I found out is when people showed up, there were a lot of, I was in Beverly Hills, Hollywood.
Right.
So, and a lot of my clients were Hollywood. Most of them were entertainment industry people, I'd say the majority. And what happened there was a lot of famous people showed up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was but their assistants filled out the registrations, right? So it was oh, okay, that's who's your assistant? But anyhow, one man was a big mogul, a very successful man in this program, and I was leading this forgiveness workshop, and he. And there's something, again, back to the body as the access, something about the yoga practice. And this man, it was his first, his friend or wife, someone brought him to this. It was his first kind of introduction to yoga, and then just being still and meditating, getting present to his body. The man, a lot opened up. A lid came off.
Right.
And this guy, like, and and then the forgiveness workshop, we're sharing and people are talking and I'm sharing my story. And and it was just so embodied in him. He had like just so much grief and like regret of how he had lived. And he just shared how, like, look, I have everything. I've got, houses in Paris or French Riviera or New York or, Bel Air. Like, he goes, I've got wealth. I've got all the things. And he said, but my kids don't know me. I can look back all the carnage of business partners and people I've burned and people that I've hurt and harmed. And it was all just like right there for him. And I shared my whole forgiveness thing. I was like, look, it's one thing to go and, because I did this the first time with my parents, I went and told them I forgive them for ruining my life. Yeah, like I woke up to the truth and I'm screwed up and I have all this resentment because you ruined my life. And it didn't go well. We didn't talk for like 2 years. Yeah. But I kept doing the work and yeah, literally a couple years later, I had this epiphany. I'm like, wait. No, this is me. Like, it's my life. Like, I'm an adult. Yeah. It's like I'm being childish, like blaming them. And so I was living in LA at the time. This is before cell phones. So I jumped on a flight to San Francisco, showed up unannounced at my parents' front door, rang the bell. They opened. I remember my mom opened the door, and my dad was standing there like, oh, no, here we go. Because I said, I need to talk to you. And they're like, oh, no, here we go. And I'm like, no, I want you to know that I just acknowledge you for everything you've done for me, and that everything good in my life is because of you. And I recognize it's all the amazing gifts you have given me, and you've been there for me, and that I've been a jerk. I've been resenting you and judging you, and I'm sorry. I just said sorry. Wow. I apologize, and they start crying, and it was really at that point I got to know my parents for the first time in my whole life. Up to that point, I was seeing them through the eyes of a teenager, but I got to know my mom. I really got to know her for the next 20, 30, whatever years that was. She lived until 2016. Got to know my dad and was able to just accept them. But here's my point. So this mogul guy shared that story, or some version of that story. And this man, this mogul guy, he left. We left the program. And then about 6 months later, I get a phone call from his wife. And she said, so-and-so passed away. He just passed away a month ago. And she said, and I just want to thank you because he was a changed man out of that retreat. She said he went and he forgave. He just forgave himself, starting with himself. And he said, he went and he just made amends with from his family, his kids, to people in his work world. Yeah. And he died. She's like, he died, I forget, from cancer or something, but he died a peaceful man. So it was like that, and that was right there, those little clues. I've now realized in hindsight, I have lots of clues like that are oh yeah, I'm in alignment with my calling. Right. Something bigger than myself. Yeah.
It's if you give yourself the space to pay attention to it, and sometimes it takes time, sometimes it takes work. I mean, I've said this before, is that, being in the middle of a really good yoga class, call it yoga, call it anything that gets you into whatever you can embody, flow, whatever it is for you. Some people it's music, some people it's intense expression. Others, it's getting to a place of peacefulness. I just feel better than almost any $1 million business deal I'm putting together, whatever. There's just something about how you feel, so there's the part of my life that's make money, do things, be productive, and there's the other where it's just feeling, connected. And most of my life when I was in addiction, even when I had, become financially, capable, I still, most of my life was feeling like there's a dark cloud over my head, raining on me, and I'm in a hurry to get away from it, but the fucking cloud just followed me everywhere I went. So I was always in a hurry to be somewhere, and then as soon as I got there, I was in a hurry to be somewhere else. Yeah. And then I started noticing that about so many of my entrepreneurial friends, you know, this drivenness, this drive is incredible because you can do things, but when it's driving you off a cliff, it's not very incredible. It's very painful, and so there's a lot of there's a lot of very successful people that really do, in some cases, not even unethical. There's just a lot of people that are driven and they help others, but they don't help themselves, and they just have that constant anxiety. And what I like about your book is you actually not only talk about all the yoga and the practices and what it does, but you actually talk about the darkness that you encountered and the self-doubt and all of the things where, and how through the process, though, you kept coming back to the work. And like, Neil, like you had said, so much of transformation can take place there, just right there. It's like this, when I was I don't know if I told this, I was just telling someone this the other day. I don't think it was this group. I was at a 12-step meeting years ago, and there was a guy that was a heroin addict, and he had gotten rid of all of his possessions that had reminded him of, where he lived, everything of when he was an addict, but he kept the recliner that he used to shoot heroin in. And he kept the recliner because he said, there's so much pain and darkness when I would sit in that chair and just, I was an addict, and I realized, it's not the chair, it was the person that was sitting in it. And so now I'm a transformed person in the same chair that I used to destroy my life with. I'm now this, I'm recovered in it. And it's, and I thought that's just such a powerful metaphor. And so there's so much you can do. So that being said, what is yoga? And anyone here that by the way, let me just say this, because I do want to hear your definition of yoga. You do describe it in the book. You go into quite depth, and your teachers and all that stuff. And, I know Vinyasa,
which means flow.
Anyway, you go. There's like 7 of them or something. What is how many different of the? So I never learn any of the terminology. I just like shit like downward dog and all that.
You don't need to. No, it's better that way.
I've never, and it's funny because I've heard it 1,000. I mean, I have to have done a couple thousand, yoga classes in my life. But it's funny. We all have different reasons to come to it. But how many of you here just listening to this, it's piqued your interest where you're like, I want to do yoga? Yeah. Okay, good. That's enough to make a difference.
Good.
The rest of you,
haven't really talked much about yoga.
What's that? Yeah.
We haven't even talked that much about yoga.
Yeah. Because I mean, what is it? Why do it?
I think that in contrast to the world we all live in, and the world is in trouble. It's like inhumanity at a humanity level, and I think that we live in a world, and as entrepreneurs, we're all about creating. So creation, which is in the world of action, and then to spend time on like what I like to call the creature. There's like creation, and then there's the creature that fulfills, takes the actions, does the thinking, and sometimes we ignore the creature, all the different aspects of body, mind, being, spiritually as well, and then there's creation, there's creature, spending more time on creature if that's what's needed, because we get so lost in that world of creating, doing, busy, all of that. The creature suffers, but what I've learned anyhow, and what I teach people is that there's like, well, what's behind the creature? Like, what's driving what's the creator? There's creator, there's creature, there's creation. Yeah, and so to get clear on your source of strength, the source of your strength, I could call that what's your creator, or for me, it's like I'm co-creator. If it just stops at self, then I'm creator, and I create, and creature and creation, and with others. But as co-creator, that includes, I mean, for me, God, and my calling. I find vision and calling as a part of co-creating, and the creature is the instrument. And a lot of us, so our calling, like I kind of, as I was sharing earlier, I just pointed to my calling, but I think that if for entrepreneurs, people in this room, I think to be clear on what is your calling, because I think for me, I know my calling is my source of strength in running, programs and working with thousands. And, we had pre-pandemic, we had 100,000 people a week coming through our platforms, our programs, all brick and mortar, and globally. And, there's a lot of people, but to be clear in my calling as a source of strength, and then as leader, you have to lead yourself. Right. That includes body. And yoga practice, as you kind of pointing to, is a very powerful way to, physically, to be embodied. To be embodied and to know what's going on in your body. I know you're pretty trained, so you can look around the room, like I can look around the room, and, we're all walking autobiographies. You can tell a lot by people by just looking at the creature. You can see what's etched on their face, fear or uncertainty or ease, equanimity, calm. It's like creature, we see it all, but to be present to one's own development. But here's what I want to say about calling, just real quick. I don't want to talk too long, but I'll say this. There's something about a return. So yoga, to me, a returning back. I think our calling is something, like when I shared about forgiveness, like with my parents, right there was my calling. Like when I forgave my dad, and something lifted off of me. And I loved my mom in that moment like I was 5 years old again. Mm-hmm. Like I literally felt like I was 5 years, like I adored my mom. And my mom adored me, and it allowed for that. But that was a return. Like it was a revolution. My second book is based on this principle. It's called 40 Days to Personal Revolution. But a revolution is a return. It's a full circle, right? You go all the way around. You come all the way back to, like in the Bible, it says we cannot enter the kingdom of heaven unless if we come back to the ways of a little child. But I think as children, we kind of had this possibility about us, this unlimited sense of possibility, like anything's possible. And we come back to that through a revolution. And what's at the center of that circle is our calling, is our source of strength. Let me just say this. It's a universe. So in yoga, they say there's Om, there's a vibrational sound at the center, and there's light, and there's motion, and then there's order. So, and if you have motion without order, there's chaos. But we're in motion. We're in creation, we're in motion. So we need to put in order. And order is discipline. You put in the discipline. So it's like you're speaking to how many yoga classes or doing your cold soaks, or that's a discipline. Right. That brings order to the motion. And you're at the source of that. And your calling, your vision, the calling is, so yoga practice, and for me, meditation is a key practice in coming back to that source of strength, that universe, that one truth, one law, one song kind of thing. Yeah. I don't know if that's a lot, but
no. Well, here's how I interpret it. I was sitting there thinking, how many times have I done yoga? Because I said, 1,000, 2,000 times, and I'm thinking, have I really done it that much? There was one year where I had 2 yoga instructors that would come 2 to 3 times a week. They would rotate. One would do 2 weeks, and I did that for couple years straight at my office, and everyone on my team that wanted to contribute, that was probably around 2007, 2008, and did a boatload of yoga, and I would do yoga outside of those 3 times a week that they would come to the office, and I would go in and I would go out. I would dip, and I'll tell you, my life just works better when I do it. Yeah. And what if I'm really stressed out or really angst out or really overwhelmed, nothing helps with the overwhelm than just freaking doing it. And the interesting thing is, the time that I feel least like doing it is the time, you know, I most need it,
Yeah,
right?
and you're always left feeling the best, right?
Totally.
After those times.
Yeah, and a lot of you, you know, you have been going to war, metaphorically, in your businesses and the stuff you have to deal with, and I just want to do whatever I can to share my perspective, our perspective. How many people have been through? How many people have you trained?
Yeah, I don't know a lot.
I mean, there's millions of people have gone through Baptiste yoga classes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah, pre-pandemic, we had, we were able to measure we had 200 brick and mortar studios, locations, and we had 100,000 people a week coming through those. But those are the ones that we could measure. I think it's
Right.
much kind of bigger than that.
yeah. So I mean, you built this business out of it, but the thing is it's so interesting. You just you learned marketing, you know, you did, and you were able to get the messaging out. And it's one thing where if you have good stuff in the world and you're an expert, that's one thing. But the ability to put it out there and do it is another. And I'll tell you, you know, building all of this, I think if you didn't have the practice, you'd probably kind of go nuts along the way, because there has to be two sides to things. You know,
Yeah.
when someone's all about physical stuff and health, I mean, I know a lot of really broke, amazing athletes.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of very unhealthy, very stressed out, rich, wealthy entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And so the beauty of this is this doesn't take a lot of time. It actually takes no time. It actually creates time. And I think one of the biggest resistance for people, you know, like doing an ice bath or going to meditate or all that. Gary Halbert, who I learned marketing from originally, he was crazy. He had this saying, and I believed it like gospel for so many years. And he said, you'll accomplish more through movement than you will through meditation. And then when I got trained in meditation, I realized, you know, sometimes you can accomplish a lot more through meditation than you can through movement. And then it occurred to me that that's what yoga is. Yoga is moving meditation. So why the fuck not do both? You know, it is. It's moving meditation, and you get into your body. And when I cannot figure out how to make decisions, if I can just get my ass on the mat,
Yeah.
it works itself out. It just does. And
But on that point, a buddy of mine, his name is Mark Benioff. He built Salesforce.
Yep.
And
Tony Robbins accidentally sent me and him an email one day. He had the wrong, I think either the wrong Joe or the wrong Mark, and that's kind of how I got introduced to him. It's funny.
Yeah.
Tony sends some weird emails once in a while.
I guess, right? Mark told me a cool story, though. He said that when he first started the company, like he worked for himself and maybe had like one employee, but he said he would go to yoga class every morning, 7 a.m. in San Francisco, and then he would drive down to wherever his offices were in Silicon Valley. So he'd do a 90-minute class in the morning, he'd go work, and then he would come back and do like a 7:30 class. And he said he would do that 5 or 6 days a week. And he said he literally worked out his entire company, every day, all the problems, all the things he was dealing with. He would get on, that mat in that sweaty room, and he would literally work out and solve his problems and how to grow, and all that. And I was like, I came to learn partly of why I was so attracted to yoga practice was I have ADHD. That some of these conversations around that were powerful for me, but that I learned kinesthetically, and I learned by doing. I just do. I was a terrible, like in school, I just couldn't sit still and all that. So, and that when those kind of stories, like when Mark shared that with me, I'm like, that's exactly how I work so much of my life and result. And that's where when I say it's important for everyone, I think anyhow, to locate your source of strength. Mm-hmm. Because that's a place where you can tap in if you're more physically oriented too, but to get in your body and move and breathe and locate your center. And things get worked out. Energy moves. Things get, the faucet turns on energetically and creatively, and it's amazing how much can get just sorted out, and you're taking care of the creature.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
So let me say this.
And you don't need to do a lot, by the way. I just want to throw that in. Like if you do 20 minutes a day, 30 minutes a day, yeah, and then maybe 2 or 3 times a week do, an hour or 90 minutes. But if you do that consistently, just try that for a month, see what happens. Yeah.
Okay, I hope you found that video awesome and useful. So if you want to get a free copy of my book, I want you to click here. And if you want to watch some more videos that'll be useful and awesome, click here. Go ahead. They're over here. Do it now. Come on. Thank you. Watch them.